might die tonight, but if I do, I'm a...
Love thyself.
Knowing there's a problem at hand to begin with.
Might die. Oh, welcome back to the Might Die podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for another episode 31 that we messed up last time, but we won't get into that. Shmedo, how are we?
Very good, thank you. How's yourself, Shane?
I'm good. Let's get straight into it. We have a pretty decent guest here, ladies and gentlemen, something that we probably weren't expecting, you weren't expecting, but Member of Parliament, David Limbrick. How are you, mate?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you here.
It's a pleasure. It is an absolute pleasure. I didn't think we'd have any sort of political people on this sort of show ever, but here we are. I don't even there's plenty of ways to start. I think probably we just, for people that might not know you, because I guess our viewers are probably mostly just a bunch of dudes that drive cars and, ride bikes and just sort of sit out the back and not really care much about politics. And I think that's probably sort of something that we're not really into politics, I think.
But at the same time, in the last little bit, it has affected us and people like us. So it's
time to give a fuck a little bit. I think that's what I'm sort of trying to say here. So, and from what I've seen of you and certain things that have come out through you, I think you've got a really good perspective on it all. I think you probably come from the same places as a lot of us, I guess, working class, if you will, not just sort of
a real person.
Yeah, you're not spoon-fed and all that sort of jazz. So to get into it, what's your basic story? Where'd you come from? What got you into what you're doing now? We'll ease into it. But yeah, where'd you start off from?
Yeah, so, I grew up in Cranbourne in Southeast Metro. Pretty nice area. When I was a kid, it was all farms and stuff. And I decided I wanted to go to university and study computers and stuff, and then I worked in that for years, was never involved in politics. And then a bit later I started complaining about stuff, and then I sort of got to a point where I was like, do you want to complain about stuff, or do you want to try and do something
fix
about
it,
do something about it? And then I got involved in the libertarian movement. Basically, we're just a political party, but also part of a wider movement, and we just think that government has gotten too big and it messes with your life too much, and our role is to try and get government out of people's lives and defend their rights, and that's sort of been my whole focus. I got elected in 2018 to state parliament, to the upper house, and then re-elected in 2022, and we've sort of been building this movement of people who are like, ask questions about, should the government really be doing this, or should they be getting involved in this part of your life, and maybe they should just be leaving you alone. And that's sort of our big focus, is like trying to get government out of people's lives.
So is that technically what the whole libertarian means? Is that the meaning of that? They're sort of like not anti-government, but just sort of checking on them a bit. Is it anti-government?
Yeah, well, we're sort of explicitly, we question the role of the state. So, fundamentally what we believe is that people should be able to do what they want as long as they're not hurting someone else.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, and I think most people intuitively think that's good, but then applying that on a sort of political level, government interferes in heaps of things where people aren't hurting other people, and so we question that. And so, we're involved in lots of areas where, might not be normal politics and normal political parties might not be that interested in it. So things like, personal freedoms around, things like tobacco has been a big one that we've been working a lot on, or drug law reform, or alcohol taxes and these sorts of things. And also, the nanny state, when they try and make rules about what you can and can't do all the time, when really it's just you making decisions about your own personal risk levels.
Yes. Yeah. And taking responsibility for yourself. In a sense. I think that's,
And I could only imagine, that's not an easy task that you guys have kind of stepped into.
Look, I think there's a lot of people that intuitively sympathise with it. So, when people want to do their own thing and then government starts interfering with what they're doing, they go like, well, why should they be doing that to me, right? And people ask questions about it. And then they realise that actually all the other things that other people want to do, the government's interfering with them as well, right? And then so you get in this situation where there's a group of people who form together and say, well, government shouldn't be in any of these areas. I can make these sorts of decisions. I can
Yes.
make these decisions myself.
Yep.
And we just think about it in terms of like the valid role for the government to intervene is when you're hurting other people.
Yep.
But when
Yes.
you're making decisions about yourself, the government should have nothing to do with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Correct. That's. I couldn't agree more with that. That's yeah. So all right. I guess to start too, there's probably So then you've sort of decided to get into it. Was that difficult, or are you, like, how do you get into something?
Like
Like
you're into computers and all the above, and then you're going.
how do you just make that switch?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question. And like lots of people ask this. So back in, I think it was 2014, there was some people just talking online, like, bitching about stuff and complaining about things. And someone chimed in and said, if you, like, instead of sitting here and whinging about stuff, why don't you actually come along to a political party meeting? And I went along to the, Libertarian Party meeting and just started chatting to people and getting involved. And we were a very, very small party at the time.
Yep.
And, I just put my hand up to start volunteering to do things and got involved. And then sooner or later they were saying, oh, you should run as a candidate in the election. I was like, oh, I don't know about that. It's a big drama and big deal. I don't know if I want to do that. They said, no, it'll be all right. And then, so I ran as a candidate, and then I did it again. And then in 2018, I was sort of devoting a lot of time into doing stuff for the party. And then they said, just get you to run as a candidate this one last time for the state election. You probably won't get elected. And then I got elected, like, to our surprise.
Yeah, right. Cool.
To our surprise. And, to my wife and boss's shock. And then, all right, you got elected. And then, all right, so in 2018 I was elected. And then we're like, okay, well, we've got to do our job now. So we, stuck to sticking to those principles after we got elected. 2019, we did a few things and didn't sort of get a lot of attention in 2019, still fairly unknown. Yep. And then the pandemic hit. And then lots of people all of a sudden had their rights taken away, or everyone did to some degree.
Yep.
And everyone's looking around saying, well, who's looking out for my rights now? And like, we were one of the few that were, and like that sort of attracted a lot of attention. Yep. And then that's just sort of built from there. So we sort of, our popularity really kicked off during the pandemic, but it's still growing now afterwards as well, because people see that the sorts of things that the government could interfere with your life in through the pandemic, actually those powers have always been there, and the government's always been interfering in things. Yep. And it's getting even worse now with, like, if you look at things like, some of the free speech issues, this sort of thing. And one that I've been talking a lot about is the tobacco wars, where the government interventions have basically caused an organised crime explosion in Melbourne. And there's arson attacks like every day just about. Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So like I guess I've sort of seen bits and pieces of, like, while we're just on that whole tobacco thing, like, I'm a smoker. It's ridiculous. The whole, like, the tax hit on ciggies and stuff now is just, it's ridiculous. Like, and you can't blame people from doing the black market thing and going for that out. Like, I'll buy a cheap pack of ciggies rather than a packet for $40.
Yeah.
So, but I don't. What do you think their goal is? To, like,
money.
But it's like, you're not helping the situation. Is it like covered under like we make them expensive, you quit? Or is it just like, we know they're not going to quit, let's just keep putting the prices up? Like, do you...
Yeah, so like there's this big sort of public health bureaucracy. Basically the same guys that were running things during COVID are the same ones that make these rules about all the tobacco stuff, right? And they have these ideas in theory of how things are going to work. And they say, well, we want people to give up cigarettes because it's bad for their health and, costs money in the health system and stuff. So we're gonna raise taxes on the cigarettes, and then they keep raising them and raising them and raising them, and they're at a point now where it's crazy expensive, right?
It's ridiculous.
If you want to buy a packet of normal legal cigarettes, you have to be rich pretty much. They're just crazy, and of course that gap between the legal retail price and the actual price without tax creates an incentive for organised crime to get involved because
Yep.
they can undercut it.
Yep.
And so that's what they've been doing. They've been smuggling in tobacco from all over the place. Plus, there's also been a bit of chop chop. Chop chop's always been around, but it's sort of
becoming more of a like a go-to because it's almost like the only option. I think.
yeah. Well, the smuggled in tobacco is sort of the biggest part of the market
Yep.
now, and I've seen estimates. It's hard to get good numbers on how much of the market, but they reckon like at least 30% of the market now is smuggled in tobacco.
Yes.
Of course, there's different groups smuggling it in, right? So you've got different criminal syndicates, and for a long time there was no sort of violence because the market wasn't saturated. So they were coming into new areas where there was no competition. But then, like in all black markets, eventually the market becomes saturated and then they start stepping on each other's toes. And then in black markets, of course, there's no sort of peaceful way of resolving disputes. Like in a normal market, you go to court or you come up with a contract or something. But you can't do that in black markets, so they use violence. And that's why you've seen all these arson attacks. So, you'll get one syndicate will come in and say, well, you're going to sell my product now. And then the tobacconist will say, well, I'm selling this other product, and if they refuse, then they firebomb their shop.
So that's
been the purpose
I guess that's the
behind.
bot. Yeah, and like I wasn't sure what the actual, I guess, terms were of what was going on, but in a nutshell, that's it. It's like almost like back in the day, bikey stuff where it was like, we'll look after you, we'll protect you. But if you don't, then it's that sort of same thing. But you're selling, we're selling you're selling my product. If you don't want to sell my product, then your whole shop's gone.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's not just tobacco either, it's vapes as well. So vaping was sort of grey market legal for a long time. You could sell the devices, but you couldn't sell the juice for them. So lots of people took up vaping to get off the smokes because they thought it was healthier and stuff, and they were importing the juice from New Zealand mostly. Because it's fully legal in New Zealand. In fact, the New Zealand government encourages it as a way to get off the smokes. But now they've shut down the borders from New Zealand. You can't order there anymore. So vapes you can only get with a prescription, which pretty much no one does. Who's going to go to the doctor for a vape, right? It's bloody stupid. But of course, organised crime's filled the market, and you can get disposable vapes pretty much anywhere. And they're all Chinese ones mostly. The problem with them is though that they're actually really well made and high tech and stuff. Like they're quite impressive, actually. I've seen lots of different ones, but because they're not a legal regulated product, you don't actually know what's in it. With the New Zealand ones, it used to say, here's the strength of the nicotine in it, and here's the other ingredients that it's got in it. But with these Chinese ones, you got no idea.
It's sketchy.
Like anything that comes from there in that form or sense, it's like you don't really know what you're getting.
You got no idea. And the tobacco is a bit different. Like with the actual cigarettes that you buy, there's a whole bunch of different brands. So depending on which syndicate, but they all seem to come out of United Arab Emirates in the Middle East. But a lot of them are sourced in Asia. Some of them are sourced in the Middle East. But you would have seen brands like maybe Manchester. They're like a Middle Eastern brand. And there's Double Happiness. They're the Chinese ones. And then there's
a bit of Double Happiness for a while there.
They're the Chinese ones.
I went to China a fair bit when I was riding bikes.
And
that was a big thing over there. The ciggies over there, the amount of just stalls in the centre of, we were never in westernised parts of the region either. We're out in the sticks pretty much, and you could buy so many different brands of cigarettes, and they weren't much more than $1 or $2 or something like that. And we were always trying to bring them back, and because of the price and whatnot.
Of course.
They at the start when I first went over there, I can't remember the year, maybe 2014 or 15, there wasn't really any pullback on what you could bring back in the way of cartons. So we brought a fair bit back. But then the next time we went within a 12-month period, that had changed drastically, and you could only bring back, I think, one packet. Something like that. So there was obviously, changing. There was changes at that point. I could only imagine now where it's at, especially after everything that's happened.
Yeah, they used to let you bring back, I think, 2 cartons. And you can only bring back 2 packets now, and one's got to be opened.
Right.
Which
So it's like I'm currently smoking this packet, and this one's for tomorrow.
Pretty much. That's all you're allowed to do, and they're pretty strict on it too,
Yeah.
is my understanding.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to. You're technically not allowed to bring in vapes either, which I don't know how that's going to work with tourism, because lots of people in other countries just vape, like in America, UK, and New
it's
Zealand.
legal.
Yeah, it's totally legal there. Most people wouldn't even think twice about it. They probably just take it on the plane with them, get off, and want to have a vape.
And then,
but it's illegal here, so
Yeah, right.
I don't know if they confiscate it at the border or what. But
Yeah.
I mean, technically they should. I don't know if they're letting people slide with it, but it's it's a bit of an embarrassment if you're expecting Australia to be a holiday destination,
yeah.
and you can't vape here. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's a bit crap.
Yeah.
And like, I guess that whole situation too, does that come under like sort of what it's not the government's choice to try and stop me from smoking cigarettes?
Yeah, and
And that why is that sort of what you believe in a sense too? Yeah, like that it's like, why are they shouldn't even, if I want to smoke cigarettes, you shouldn't be trying to stop me by making the price go up.
yeah, and we see the intention is good, right? Like, because no one, I don't think people want people to smoke, right? Because
For sure.
everyone knows it's bad for you, right? You
Yep.
get cancer and all sorts
Yep.
of diseases,
Yep.
right? But they think that through these interventions that they're going to fix the problem, whereas really what's happening, they're just making new problems. So
Yes.
with the tobacco excise tax, they've created this problem of organised crime getting in the market. With banning vaping, like they've created this problem where people who are smokers and want to get off the smokes, they've taken away an option for them.
Yeah.
Lots of people say that their health is way better after moving on to vapes from smokes, but they've taken away that option from people. And so all these interventions are actually creating other harms, which they don't seem to recognise. And I think that's a problem. So,
Of course not. But then you can go and into their system and request a vape via a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like
Ching.
Yeah,
money. Yeah.
If they're not getting $1 out of it, that's the basic.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the ones that you can get prescriptions for, they're actually made by, big pharma and big tobacco. So, so it's sort of crazy. So yeah,
If we're not monetizing it, you can't have it.
yeah,
And
pretty much. And tobacco excise is a big part of revenue for the federal government. Like they do make a lot of money out of it.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
The amount people say, oh well, smoking causes all these costs in the healthcare system, and it does cause costs, but the amount of excise tax that people pay is way in excess of any costs. And
Yep.
yeah,
Interesting.
What in that regard of smoking and all the above, legalization of marijuana? Where does that sit with you? And
yeah, we support full legalization of cannabis, and always have. Our party's been around since 2001.
Yep.
We've always supported cannabis legalization, both for medical and recreational purposes.
Yep.
We had a big breakthrough in Victoria recently. It's been legalised for medical use now since 2016.
Yep. Again,
And
through the doctor's.
yeah, you have to go through doctors, and it's a bit of a pain in the ass.
Yep.
But you can get it legally
get it,
if you want it for to treat some sort of condition.
Yep.
But the big problem with cannabis has always been it stays in your system for a long time.
Yep.
Correct.
And it's not like alcohol where, if you've got a high blood alcohol concentration of alcohol, you're impaired, right? And you shouldn't be driving your car.
Yep.
But with cannabis, you can still have it in your system the next day, be stone cold sober,
Yep.
and get pinged by the cops if they do one of those swab tests.
Yep.
And so there's been a change just recently. It's coming into effect next year. We've been saying, they should be testing for impairment, not testing whether there's cannabis in your
Correct.
system.
Yep.
So they've got a new defence now. If you have a cannabis prescription, medical cannabis prescription,
Yep.
and you get busted for drug driving, then you've got a defence. Like if you're not impaired, you can potentially get off, and
Right.
so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That had to come into play.
Yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Because it was quite backwards. It's like, if we go to like the actual medical side of things, and if say you've got a what's it called where they epilepsy, it's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good for epilepsy. So it's
Sure.
like, okay, you probably shouldn't be driving with epilepsy anyway. But anyway, if it is that case, it's like, if you have you have your medicine on Tuesday, you're not impaired, but like it's still in your system.
Friday.
Yeah, and I think that's always been, I guess, like the wall that's come against the whole like legalization of it. It's like it's still legal, but you can't really do anything because even if you know, had it for this certain reason, it's still in your system for a month.
You have to think about what you do for that next however long
Yeah,
in front.
yeah.
And it's just, and I guess they probably they know that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we've got them stuck.
Again, coming from someone like you who's been heavily addicted to pain meds,
Yes.
you know for a fact that won't even come up on any sort of drug test.
Oh,
but
I've
you've
tested
been
it. Yes.
flying,
Yes.
you know what I mean, off your guts.
Yep. And
Pulled
I've-
over
I've
off your
been-
guts and they let you go.
Yeah, the cops actually said, this is in Queensland, and the cops actually said, like, mate, we know you are impaired, and, you know, we've had multiple cars call and report you on the road, you know, because of being impaired from prescription medication.
Yep.
They tested me and they did all of that, and they couldn't put their finger on any of it, and they said, unfortunately for us, like, we have to let you go. We can't do anything here. And off I went down the road, probably swaying just as much as I was before they pulled me up. It's
Yeah, like they don't test regularly for drugs that are legal, like legally
yes,
prescribed drugs. So
Yep, yep.
opiates and benzodiazepines,
Yep.
which is sort of crazy because benzos have a way bigger effect on your driving
Major.
than
The most,
cannabis.
and like,
major.
yeah, like you are,
Like they're as bad as alcohol, basically.
Worse.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would
It's
almost say
worse,
worse because
I feel.
you're, I don't know, you're more like just in your head. You're way more floaty than being alcohol. Like,
But at the same
alcohol-
time too, you feel you're there.
yeah, but you're
You're
not.
You're not. Where
Yeah.
alcohol, you're, you know, a bit distorted.
Yeah.
Where benzos and all of that, you're still registering enough to yourself within, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But you might not look okay from the outside looking in, but from the inside out, you're feeling good.
Yeah,
I'm
which is
fine.
worst, which is more of a situation that's going to get you in trouble because you're going to get in the car easier. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm actually off my guts, but I feel fine. I'm going to drive. Where I think with alcohol, you're always going to get your dudes that are a little bit confident. But I think there's sort of that level of alcohol that is like,
But there's
I'm
always
not,
that.
I'm not driving.
There's always that point too of what we're saying is, you know, if you're coherent enough when you've been drinking before you get in the car, but you know you shouldn't be because you are over,
Yep.
you can still understand all
Yep.
the above. Like, you don't have to question yourself
Yeah.
on the opiates or
Correct.
benzos.
Yeah.
With alcohol, people scare themselves
'Cause
away
they don't
from
wanna get
getting in the
busted.
car because, oh shit, I might get done. If I get done, missus, kids, work, all the above. But, you know, on prescribed medication, I don't even have to worry about that.
I could die, but I'm not going to I'm not going to lose my license.
They're not even going to know that I'm on it. They are, but they're not going to be able to pin me.
Yeah, the only things that they test for on the oral swab tests is cannabis, amphetamines, and MDMA. So
Yeah.
they do test
Right.
for that,
Yeah.
but they don't. Of course, they're all illegal, right? So they don't. Yeah, they only test for those illegal ones. But I mean, the other crazy thing about what they're doing with the testing on cannabis is a lot of people use I know heaps of people who use cannabis to try and get off some of these other
Yes.
meds like opiates and benzos because people are worried about the health effects and they're highly addictive and all that sort of thing. And some people can replace them with cannabis, but then they're too scared to do that because they're worried, the next day they might get pinged and lose their license. And if you live in a regional area, like if you lived around here without a license, it's a big drama, right? Like having to get public transport and stuff, it'd be like a nightmare.
Yep.
And so a lot of people just say, I'll just keep taking the benzos then, which isn't great. Right?
Correct. Yes.
Not at all.
I was sort of thinking that what would that come into play with something like, you know how like certain job sites, things like especially like unionies ones, they're constantly drug tested.
Yeah.
Will the same sort of situation come into play with something like that? Like, okay, you smoked weed on the weekend, but you're back here for work on Monday, you're fine.
No,
Or is it only a road legal sort of thing at the moment?
So for heavy machinery and stuff, my understanding is they'll test for everything.
Everything.
And you'll lose your job or they'll send you off site if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
test positive for anything.
Instantly.
right.
That includes opiates and benzos and stuff. They won't let you take.
It really?
So-
I didn't know that.
So
That's cool.
how do they pick up on that then?
with swab tests. Yeah.
So there's ones that will pick up things like benzos and that.
Yeah.
So the cops don't drive around with those.
No.
Interesting.
What? So,
Because the problem is they'd end up busting half the drivers on the road if they did that. So-
Every mum,
our job would be too hard.
every like mother out there that's popping. Yeah, wow. That's actually interesting. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that they test for that in those situations. Like, so if you will go to the mines, if you will, mines.
Yeah,
are
they're
pretty
real
big
strict in mines.
100%.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that.
I knew that mines, you know, because I've got a lot of mates that do fly out work, and it's like, since that, no, I cannot even smoke because it's randomly tested, and I'll go back after me 2 weeks off, and then so it's just like completely out of the question from that time on. But it's the first I've heard of. Yeah, benzos and
Depends on the company. Like it's up to company policy. Like it's not
Fair enough.
It's not a government thing. But my understanding is that most of these mining companies are like super strict on that sort of stuff, and they test for everything, and it's random, like you
Which
say.
I can also agree with too. You don't want people on your job site off their guts. Like I don't think that's a bad thing.
Not even on
Especially
the job
driving
site.
heavy, like you said, heavy.
That's the biggest thing. Like cranes, major heavy machinery, hectic.
Yep. Okay, hectic. That's all pretty full on. A few, one thing too that I've sort of always been a little bit like wild about is Parliament itself. And when you go in there and you say your little speech and you've got your thing and you have a bunch of what it looks like on the outside, children yelling, and I'm all for a good debate. I think if you can have a healthy back and forth, that's great. But it's pretty eye-opening and it's immature. It looks immature. And I guess as just a random bogan dude sitting back going, if that's how they're acting when they're trying to have an engaging conversation or something, how can I give them any respect to run my country? Like that's how I've always seen it. Like that's a joke. Like shut up, let him speak, and when it's time for you to speak, you speak. But it's like not that. It's very. How do you deal with that? Handle it? Is it?
Do you see it like that?
It's mostly the major parties smacking each other. So, like the way it's actually physically set up in the chamber. So I'm in the upper house in state parliament. So you have the government on one side, the opposition on the other, and then up here is the crossbench, and that's where I sit because I'm a minor party. We sit on the crossbench. You know, we've got the Greens and the Shooters and Farmers and all the others. Usually it's the major parties just smacking each other, and it's like most of the crossbench just sort of sits there quietly and watches.
And
I occasionally chime in, but not much. Most of the time I just sit there. But
And do you not chime in because you're just like, oh, I'm not going to get involved, or it's just like, I don't care about what you're talking about, or this is just absolutely stupid?
Well, we see them as like, I don't know, they do carry on a bit. I think, I'm not even sure I think they're just putting on a show.
Is that part of the game you play? Like, that's what because from the outside, it just looks ridiculous. But I get that, if that's part of the, that might help in ways sometimes just to hear that critic in the corner. But yeah, from the outside, it just looks unprofessional.
Well, it looks that way to me too half the time. But
that's always good to know then. Good, good. Because
I think that, look, sometimes I wonder why they're doing it myself. Because you look at it and you just think, who's watching, for a start? And they're sort of just trying to intimidate each other, the major parties, because their role for a major party, if you're the opposition, you're trying to make the government look stupid, right? And so they're trying to make them look silly. And then the government, you're trying to make yourself look like you're doing a good job, and that the other clowns haven't got a clue what they're doing. But on the crossbench, we're not part of that. We're not trying to form government, and we're not trying to necessarily attack the government. We've got our own sort of agendas that we're into, and so we see that and we're just like, oh well, I'll just sit that out, I suppose. So
because it's wild. You see some of them and you're just like, what are you yelling at each other for? And it's real childish, schoolyard shit, in the background, trying to cut someone off as they're trying to get their point across, sort of thing. And it's just very like, how do we expect you guys to run our country when you're acting like children? Like,
it mostly happens during question time. So like that each parliament has what's called question time, and in our parliament it's at midday and that's when the opposition gets a chance to ask, or not just the opposition, anyone gets a chance to ask the government questions, and then the minister has to stand up and give an answer.
Yep.
And usually the questions from the crossbench, they're actual like, legit good faith questions. You're trying to get an answer about something that you're interested in.
Yep.
But the opposition, when they ask questions, they're sort of trying to trip the government up or make them look stupid or whatever. And they react to that, right? So the government will be like, well, like there was one last week, right, where there was some really sad, awful situation to do with child protection, right?
Yep.
And the opposition asked some question directly related to a case involving a child, which, I was just like, whoa, like, should you be talking about that in public, sort of thing? And and then, of course, the government got pissed off with that because they're like, why are you talking about this sort of stuff in public? Because, there's a kid involved in this. Like, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. And then they got really angry about it. And I think that anger was actually genuine. Like, they were both.
Yeah, right.
Because one side saw it as like some, morally righteous thing to ask about it. But then the other side was like, this is like, the government was like, well, this is irresponsible to be talking about this sort of thing. And so they got real fired up at each other. And,
Interesting.
Yeah. And we were just sort of sitting it out going, well, I don't want to be involved in that. Like, I don't know the details of actually what they were talking about either. So you're like, do you really want to say anything there? Like, because sometimes it's really heavy stuff. Like sometimes, when they're talking about stuff where people's lives are at stake, it's really heavy shit, and sometimes people get really passionate about it and fired up about it. I mean, a lot of times I get fired up about things too, and hit at the government, but they don't tend to hit back at like minor parties that much because like it's like they're punching down sort of
that's
thing.
sort of what, and is it almost like, is it more like they almost like laugh at you guys in like a ha ha ha, we're better than yous, or it's just like they're not even worth having a go at because we're going to go at the big dogs?
The government, I don't think the government laughs at us. Certainly they don't laugh at me. In some ways we can cause more damage than the opposition because like a lot of the minor parties, especially me and a couple of others, we've got fairly big social media profiles. We can go out and get media ourselves. Yeah. We come at them in ways that they don't expect.
Yep.
And so they sort of see us as a bit more dangerous in some ways because the opposition are really predictable in what they do.
Yeah, they're caught in their own loop where you guys are sort of taking these new out, like things like social media. Are predominantly where I don't think they're using those tactics. They're still using their old school. Yeah, I don't think that's interesting.
Like I use X. I use lots of different social media platforms, but I use X a lot.
Yep.
But my profile on X is like, I think at the moment it's like 3 times bigger than the Premier. And so they sort of see, well, I think maybe they think, is David Limbrick going to cause a stink on social media about this, and can we deal with it? And maybe we should just try and neutralise it sort of thing. I think that's how they think.
Right. That's good.
So it's good. It means you can punch above your weight, right?
Yeah.
Because, if you've got social media, you can do that. And, Insta and Facebook is sort of less political, but still, I mean, Insta is how you made some comment on one of my things and said you should come on my show, and then I said, why not?
Well, I just
because it leads to weird places, right?
100%. It was like the whole. I think my mic's got a bit weird. I think it was something to do with the whole free speech thing. And I was just sort of like, let's talk about this. But the original thing I did see of yours was, I mean, I think I'd probably seen bits and pieces during the COVID thing, but I was sort of just like, whatever. But you had that speech not long ago about the ride-outs in the city. Which like sort of really resonated to me because like I've done a few of them. Like, hold on, my mic's acting weird. My apprentice pretty much does them all the time and all that. He like almost introduced me to the whole world of ride-outs. And I even seen a lot of it at the start that was very much like, these coppers are very heavy-handed on these kids. And like, okay, from a far it can look intimidating and dangerous and all that shit, and they're all whoop whooping. But like, for one, 90% of these kids have actually 99% more bike control than like anyone else. Like they're so controlled on a bike, it's unbelievable. And I just didn't really the way they were like. It was like they were like they're kids. They're literally like, some of these kids are like 13 and they're like getting ripped off bikes by a grown man. And it's like, that needs to change. And I think their intimidation through it all too, like it didn't help. Like being on some ride outs, and like everyone was sort of, we're all good. We're going for the ride. If a copper did rock up, everyone starts to panic. And then you've got all these little kids that don't really know what they're doing, and they're running red lights and they're doing all this shit because they think they're going to get done by the coppers. And it's, to me, it's like, well, that can't go down like that. You're actually creating more of a problem. Like if you just let the kids be, they're probably going to be all right, you know? And
give them a beep and a wave, and then they're not creating the pressure and the anxiety and the, oh shit, the cops are here when they do roll past.
Yes.
So the reason that we decided to say something about that, because it was all in the media, right? And the cops were really heavy-handed on these kids, and then all these people started sort of trying to decide whether they liked them or not, because they thought there was some political angle with it or something. And we were looking into it. I was like, well, what's going on here? And then my team was looking at it, and I was like, they're just kids riding bikes. Like, like there's no sort of political thing here other than, you know, it's a bunch of young blokes mostly who want to get together and ride their bikes. And I was just like, why are they giving them a hard time? Like, after all the crap that happened during the pandemic, you couldn't see your mates, and all the bad shit that you could be getting into, these kids decide to ride their bikes. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, let them go, I reckon.
Still getting pinned.
People were saying, oh, they're blocking the roads and stuff. I'm like, well, they're traffic, you know, like they're allowed to use the roads.
That was a really good point that I don't think even I had like clicked on during it all. It's like, okay, and it looks intimidating when there's 30 bikes in a row, but those bikes only take up the same space as a B-double truck.
Yeah. And so
what's the difference?
Yeah, and you're allowed to ride on the road with a bike. Like, it's not like you're doing anything wrong. So I thought the way that they were treated was just wrong. And so that's why we spoke out, because we were like, well, why should these guys be demonised just for riding their bikes? I mean, they're not doing anything wrong, really.
There needs to be so much more of you guys in that sense, like to certain things in this world.
Was it like at the start, was it like that sort of like gang related? Like, is it like, are they a gang? So we have to like squash the gangs?
I think people were just speculating. Like, some people thought it might be some, you know, climate protest sort of thing, which it wasn't. And people just had these, or maybe it's a gang or something like that. And people were just speculating about it. And they couldn't decide whether they, you know, liked them or hated them, because they hadn't decided, you know, which sort of tribe they fitted into. But the reality was that they were just kids riding bikes, right? I mean, that's all it was. Like, as far as I could tell, they were, you know.
Like, and that's literally what it is. From being amongst it too, it's actually a really, really, really good community. Especially, like you said, after things like COVID and all that stuff have come through, these kids have literally spent 2 years in their rooms playing computer games because they had to. And now they've got the opportunity to come out. They've met all these people online, and like, that's the biggest thing too. That it's not like they're kids from the city, or they're all a bunch of kids that enjoy the same thing, have this network going on, and then they all meet in one place. So it's like they're from everywhere. They're not just like the one, like a gang of kids from Bacchus Marsh have all rolled into the city and they're like doing laps. It's like that kid's from here, that kid's from the other side, that kid's from up here. And like the way they all come together, it's, as an older dude, it's cool to see. It's like, man, wish what we had a bit more like that when we were young.
They just like coordinate on social media.
Pretty much. They've got like, you know, group chats and all that stuff. All right, we're meeting here. Tell your friends, let's go for a ride. And, you know, and also like the variety of, it's not just like, it's so multicultural that it's crazy. There's no judging. It's like, if you've got a bike, come ride with us. You know, like, it's a really good community of like everyone's. And like, that's what I was like, this is a good thing for community, for everyone. And like, here the cops are again beating these kids down. And, you know, and then you obviously get your couple of Karens too that like get scared because there's heaps of bikes and then they have a little bit of a whinge and it's like, just back off. Like, they're literally just kids on bikes. And and if that was a gang of, if that was a you know, how many times do you pull up on the street and there's like 30 dudes on road bike, like cyclists?
Yeah, yeah.
And
they're scarier, right?
They don't have the bike skill that these kids do, I'm telling you.
and that's
Lycra's scary, man.
that's the other thing too. It's like you've got all these dudes that everyone sort of actually gets in the way of everyone and is ignorant and arrogant and is just like, and with probably less skill. One, because their bikes can't even do much. So like you hit the wrong rock on one of them bikes, you're going to come off. Where like these kids have got unbelievable bike skills. They're like having fun. It's not like, I don't know. It just, what's the difference if they can shut down the Westgate Bridge for a, you know, a fun run bike ride for all these cyclists? Why can't the kids do it? Sort of. Obviously, that comes down to organisation and actually shutting things down and a little bit of council work. But yeah, it's interesting. But it's also good that you sort of stood up to that and sort of put it in the air that it is just, they're just kids.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I got a really big surprise when I did that because, like, I got a message from my sister, and apparently my nephew was one of them, and he said, "Oh, my uncle's sticking up for us." So he was really happy, apparently. But
awesome.
Yeah, I didn't even know he was involved in it. But
yeah.
And that's that's it's one of those things where like the truth is too, that's what's trendy now for kids. Like for kids to like, what's cool for kids is that sort of like getting on a bike and popping a wheelie. Like any kid, like even if any kid I talk to, if I can come back to like, yeah, I ride bikes, and they're like, do you do wheelies? Do you? So like it's trendy, and like the last thing you want to do is like take that away from the kids because they already don't have much anymore. You know, like you're just not allowed to do anything. So
bike's pretty wholesome. Like, you know, they're just riding. Like, it's pretty wholesome stuff.
That's so, it's
and a normal person that sees it, you know, sees anything as for what it is and doesn't have an agenda towards it because it's creating this or that.
Yep.
I.e. yourself, it's really nice to hear and feel and see that there's people like yourself out there that are willing to see things for what they are and they're not all bad things. And, you know, because as you said, Shane, like everything's getting taken away from us.
Yeah. Which again that's again why you're doing that's what your fight's for, I guess. Yeah, like that's sort of why
we're pushing back against. Like again, like this is a case of people making their own decisions and not hurting other people. If they're not hurting other people, why are the cops getting involved? Right?
Correct.
They shouldn't be.
Yeah, big believer of that. Taking your own responsibility, and it's like the government have just sort of hit this place where again, and that's obviously where the whole like the nanny state thing comes in. It's like, well, we've got the responsibility of everything. It's like, well, no, I'm a grown man and I can look after myself. And you know, if I need yous, I'll call yous. But other than that,
I like that. If I need you, I'll call you.
Well, like, and, you know,
that's the best government ever. If you need us, give us a call. Otherwise,
just go stay in your little White Housey thing over there. We just don't need you, man. Like, and I think that's what I guess needs to sort of happen. I mean, obviously, too, that's the end goal. There's going to be a lot of cleanup in the middle of that.
Yeah, well, we're heading the wrong way in lots of ways, I think. So, you know, they're doing a lot of stuff now where the government is trying to put rules in about what you can and can't say and about what you can and can't see on social media and what age you should be, like rather than let parents decide that. They want the government to decide, you know, if you're under 16, you can't use social media. Now, I reckon a lot of these ride-out kids, they'd be under 16. Yeah,
correct.
And a lot of them probably found out about it from social media. So what are they going to do? Shut it down? Like, I mean, that's sort of what they're doing now. And at the federal level, they're trying to have these systems to try and decide what is and isn't what they call misinformation. You know, but the government itself produces massive amounts of misinformation. They lie all the time.
That's what they're best at doing.
Which, Again, yeah, to me, that's just like, that's that double edge of like, how can you guys expect to like have this level of like, it'll never work. And if you can see it for what it is, you can't expect to give us not misinformation when you're giving out the misinformation. Like, we don't trust what you're saying because it's probably going to be misinformation because we're used to you guys lying. Like, I don't know, it's... Yeah.
The thing that actually got me, like, interested in, questioning the government in the first place was in when the Iraq War, when they had that in the early 21st century.
Yep.
They took us to war. Remember they talked about the weapons of mass destruction. And they came out with these big briefings, and the government in America and Australia was saying, we've got to invade Iraq because of these weapons of mass destruction. Then we had this big war, and we sent soldiers over there. And then after the war, they said, oh, guess what? There was no weapons of mass destruction. That was all bullshit.
Yeah.
And I was like, hang on, we just went to war on a freaking lie?
Yep.
Like, you lied to us about that? Or... bad intelligence that, if you were being charitable, you might say they had bad intelligence, but whatever, it was still not the truth.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, how often do they actually do this? And actually they do it a lot
I was
about all
say
sorts
more
of things.
than not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's lots of things that they, during the pandemic, they lied to us about all sorts of nonsense. They said things about, we're doing this for your own good, like they said it about kids, and they shut down the schools, and we were like, but kids aren't in danger. Like, kids weren't in danger from COVID. It was only older people that were actually in danger. And so a lot of this stuff that they said during the pandemic was bullshit as well.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think, obviously, too, do you think after all that went down, and obviously everyone's sort of, I wouldn't say fully waking up, but everyone's sort of having a little bit of a side eye a bit more now. They're like looking around a little bit more. Have you seen the impact of that in you? Like, do you think a lot more people are following you now because they can see what's going on, and you're the only one that is being, I guess, the transparent or one of? Oh,
look, there's definitely been a lot more interest in libertarian ideas, and not just me personally, but our party and people who are running as candidates. There's been a lot more interest. But people are being a lot more skeptical about government actions. The government can't easily control narratives on things anymore. Like what they've been doing with this, misinformation laws and things like this. People are having a much, much larger reaction to it than I think the government expected. And they can't control it. Like, it's out of control now. You only have to look on the reactions on social media to this. Also with the social media ban for children. Like, parents are outraged by it. They're saying, well, if my kids use social media under 16, are you saying I'm a bad parent? Like, I mean, I've got 3 boys, and one of my boys is 15, and he has his own YouTube channel. He makes YouTube content. And like, you're saying I'm a bad parent? Like, he uses it really productively. And my kids use YouTube all the time for learning about stuff. Like, they're interested in science and music and stuff, so they're watching videos on that, and there's heaps of people that make good content about science and music, and I don't see that as a harmful thing. Like, social media it's like any technology, right? It can be used for good or evil. Correct. And there's undoubtedly lots of bad shit on social media, and there's lots of kids that have bad experiences. They get bullied, or they see shit that's not appropriate or whatever. But like, that's up to the parents to help with. And I've said a few times, like, if the government needs to get involved, maybe they should be helping educate parents on how to use, tools to control their kids' use. What they think is appropriate, what sort of things they can access. Like, I use tools like Apple Family Controls, but there's heaps of tools out there, and parents can control that sort of stuff. So I just don't think the government should be interfering like that. And I made the point recently that I don't know whether you've ever heard of 6 News. They're like a news.
I did see one of your videos. And they're all young kids.
They're kids. They're kids. They're teenagers, right? And I think the guy Leo, who started it, I think he started it when he was 12 years old, right?
Holy shit.
And their primary distribution channel is social media, and they've been running it for years now. They've got heaps of kids. I'm like, what? You're going to shut them down? Like, I actually asked the Premier about it in Parliament last week. I said, well, she did an interview with them. She did an interview with them, and they agreed to, like, remove kids from social media. I'm like, well, what are you going to do? Shut them down? Like, it's not cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that just goes back to, it's such a vicious circle because, you take something away that the kids are, genuinely into and all the above. You strip that from them, will rebel, all the above, turning to a different source, which is probably going to be a fucking bad one.
Yep.
Whatever. Like, it's such a vicious fucking circle that these people, the government, are always creating.
Yeah,
constantly.
And these kids, like, they're so good at what they do.
Yeah.
Like, I reckon they're going to be like the next, News Corp, Murdoch sort of empire sort of thing.
Yeah,
Like, they're good at it, and like, why stand in their way? Like, I don't think, their parents must be awful for letting them do that. I think, wow, their parents must be awesome letting them do that.
Yeah.
Like,
And
how
like,
cool is that?
There's a level of entrepreneurship within all that. Like, that these kids are starting these channels. There's a dream there. There's they can see people that are doing it, that they're like, I'm going to strive towards, making my own YouTube channel and entertaining people and doing all that sort of stuff. And then for the government just to go, no, you can't do that. Like, go back to school, sort of. At the end of the day, too, to me, it's like you said, they've got all this access to all this great information. They don't want them
to have
that information. It's sort of keep them dumb, keep them in the schools. If they're watching all this YouTube videos and then they can be an entrepreneur at 19 and be making all this money, and then there's definitely
it's not really what they want.
Correct.
And they don't want it to grow, which it will only grow.
It's
the way that I think it works from the government's point of view is they have these public health types, right?
Yep.
Like, I always come back to these guys because they cause so much trouble and everyone thinks they're good, but like, actually they don't think about the unintended consequences of the things that they put forward. And they have these like ideas that they dream up and then they sell them to a minister.
Yep.
And because they sound good and they've got, all these qualifications in what they're talking about, the minister says, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Yep.
Has no popular support.
Yep.
And then the minister will go out and say, well, this is our policy now. We're going to do this. And then they act shocked when they get a pushback from the public, and the public's going, hang on, you're going to do what? Like, why are you doing that? And like, it's not like an issue where there's grassroots support, right? Like, it's not like there's a whole bunch of people that have gotten together and pressured the government and said, we want to do this or whatever. This is like a top-down thing. This is like a group of bureaucrats that live in this bubble world, have spoken to a minister and convinced him it's a good idea.
Yep.
And they haven't spoken to mums and dads of Australia, and they haven't spoken to the kids. Yeah. And they push back on it, and they get a shock. And it's good that they get a shock, though, I think. So,
but shouldn't, I don't know, the minister be looking into the things that are getting brung to them before they...
Well, that's it. They shouldn't just like listen to
that group,
and
then run off what they've said. Like, hang on a minute, I should have a little bit of a suss on what they've just brung to me to have my own understanding of it, rather than just listening to them and going off their word.
Does that just come into the bubble thing though?
Well, I think
just
so.
all in this little make believe bubble of like reality isn't even a thing for them.
Like, you don't necessarily think. You don't need a minister to be an expert in the area that they're responsible for, right? But a minister's job is to be they're like a director, right? They're meant to direct it and they take advice from the right people. But what they should be doing is looking at the outcomes of that advice, and when they get bad advice, sack those people. Like I've said openly many times, I can't believe that the health minister still hasn't sacked the people that are recommending their tobacco policy. Yep. Like, when you've literally got arson attacks every single week, how can you think that that's like a good outcome for that policy? Surely he should be sacking those people, right? Because like, if you're a manager in a job and you've got staff that tell you to do something and then you do that, and then you end up with firebombing attacks every week, you'd say, well, maybe I got bad advice and I shouldn't be listening to that anymore, and I get rid of them. But they still keep them. That's the weird thing.
Do you think that that's part of the agenda, though, of them trying to create some sort of shit show constantly, and this is just one of those things now, and what's happening, and the arson attacks on the tobacconists and whatnot, and they it's part of their agenda for whatever reason. It's covering up things. It's putting the spotlight on that, and they're doing other things that are. You know,
I don't think they're competent enough to manage something that
I was
sophisticated.
almost
I think it's more like if it was some big conspiracy or something. Like I've seen these people up close, and like I just don't think that they could actually manage that. Like
fair.
It's
I think
almost
if you're
just
gonna-
like
if
a
you're gonna err on-
denial-y thing. Like they're just
Yeah.
all in a bubbly world of like, you just don't really know what's going on the streets.
Yeah, I reckon a lot of it is just a disconnect.
Yeah, yeah,
Like the tobacco thing is so obvious that the incentive is caused by these taxes, but they've got themselves in a situation where no one who's in those advisory positions, it's taboo to say we should cut tobacco excise tax because they've been recommending it for years, right? That's been their advice for years. To go back on that would be to say we were wrong. We screwed up.
That was
We
what I was going to say.
And so they double down. They go further and further and further. So they say, no, actually what we need is more law enforcement. We need more cops. We need more border controls. We need all these other things, because to say otherwise would mean to say that they're wrong and they screwed up and they need to be sacked or resigned or whatever.
happened with everything, right?
Yeah.
COVID-19.
Yeah, same thing.
It was all same
It's
thing.
double down. They never learn
Keep
from
the
mistakes.
lie going, sort
And
of.
then that became also onto the people that, were waking up or realizing things for the first time in a very long time, if not ever in their lifetime. And older people, generations, were doing that through COVID. And then they were still like, they couldn't come to terms with it because it's like, well, now I've been lied to for the last 52 years of my life, or 40 years of my life, or 35 years, and I can't come to terms with that. So I'm going to continue to believe and carry on. Where it's like, that's fucking crazy.
Yep. It's also called denial, technically, in a nutshell. But yeah, is that. So I was I seen something pop up last week how they've shut down. They're not doing the Maya windows because of some I don't know if that's like political shit or is that.
Yeah.
But is that sort of the same thing of like delusional? Like you've got this like big bright idea to like be a good person, but you've just taken it away from every single child in Victoria.
Yeah,
That's
this is less of a government thing. So the story is that there's been these pro-Palestine protests in the city pretty much every week for the last year.
Yep.
A lot of people in the city have been getting pissed off about it because they're disrupting businesses and traffic and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Now, of course, the Maya windows, they've been around forever, right? And parents take their kids there, and so this group threatened to like have a big protest there. I think people were pissed off about it because they were saying, oh, you shouldn't be celebrating stuff here when there's children dying overseas in some faraway land. And the state government, to their credit, they said, well, the state government can't fix problems in the Middle East, right?
Yeah. None of us really can.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people are sort of getting fed up with these groups bringing problems from faraway lands when we've got our own problems here.
Yeah.
And so Maya was worried about safety of visitors. So Maya said they're going to shut it down, and everyone cracked the shits about it.
Right.
But of course, Maya was just managing their risk, right? Because they don't want people getting hurt at their store.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, the group called it off, and I think it did go ahead yesterday anyway, as planned, but the weather was shit anyway, so I don't think many people turned up. But it did go ahead in the end, so yeah.
Yep. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because it's all that weird shit just sort of pops in and out, and you're just sort of like, yeah, what are they doing here? Like, you just keep kicking the average, you know what I mean? Just like every week there's just something else that makes everyone go, oh, another thing that we're just going to miss out on or be shafted with or, like when are we going to, but again, it's because they're just that deep now. That's almost like they're just doubling down on everything. It's just,
the problem is when they use stuff like this as an excuse to bring in more laws, because that's sort of what they started talking about, right? The Premier started talking about, oh, well, we need these new laws to stop these people. And then the opposition said, oh, we need these new laws to stop these people as well. And I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. Like maybe let's stop with the new laws thing. Because that's their response all the time, because that's what governments do. They bring in new laws, right? Yep. And so they bring in these laws as a knee-jerk response to a single incident, and they get support because people don't like, the Christmas windows being shut down, for example.
Yep.
But then there's all these other consequences that they didn't think about further down the track. So
the ripple effect of all this, everything has a ripple effect. It's like they just do not consider ripple effects. It's like it looks good on paper. Who cares what happens on the outside?
There's been so many knee-jerk responses to many things. Like years ago, there was that that guy that drove around the city in his car and killed lots of people, and he was on bail, and so they said, well, our bail laws are screwed up, and so they've got to tighten down that. So they clamped it down big time, except that had the consequence of like the remand centres were overflowing with people who weren't actually, a lot of them weren't actually a danger.
Yep.
And so then they cleared that back the other way and they went too far the other way. And so you ended up, like, because it wasn't well thought out in the first place, they just went for this knee-jerk response. It caused all these other problems. Yeah, because at one stage, remand was just like overflowing with people and like for really minor stuff as well.
Like they didn't need to be there at all. And it's just,
remand is meant to be for like, you know, if you don't get bail, but like you're meant to get bail normally unless you sort of pose a danger to people. So for violent crimes and stuff like that. But people were getting bail, like were getting held in remand for all sorts of, you know, for drug stuff where you're not really, you know, it's not like you're going to go out and hit someone or whatever.
You're not an actual threat to society in a sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, and obviously too, we'll probably, well, I guess you had a lot, you probably became the loudest during the pandemic, do you think? Is that sort of where you really sort of stepped in?
I think in Victoria, definitely, we sort of, the interesting thing is a lot of other people opposed what the government was doing, but they didn't sort of manage to make a lot of noise about it. So, I don't know, one of the things that I did that early on was I just started going along to the protests that were happening around the city. Like there were all sorts of protests for all different things. Yep. But we were just going along to like check it out basically and see what happened. You know, what are they actually protesting about? Yep. How does the police respond? All that sort of stuff, and listening to their messages. And the main reason is because like when the media reports on it, or when the government talks about it, it's usually bullshit. So I think it's always better to go and see it with your own eyes. And definitely. What we noticed was that, we called out the lies, like that things that were bullshit in the media. And I think people started to see, oh, well, they're actually going along and checking it out. And I saw it as my job. Yep. But no other MPs really went along like we did to do that. Yes. Because I was sort of scared. And like, it is a bit scary. You do worry about your security and stuff. I just thought, well, it's my job, right, to see that sort of thing. And that's sort of what we did a lot of and still do sometimes go along to protests to, check out what's going on. But
which realistically is, I think, the smartest thing. Like, as you say, if you can be there and you can feel it, you can see it for yourself in your own eyes, because everything else is shit or bullshit that comes out and you're not really too sure. So in your position, there would be nothing better to do than to go along for you and see it for yourself.
Yeah, and then like when people like start talking to me or making assertions about what happened there, I can say, well, no, that's bullshit, because I was there and I saw it. Like that's not true. And there's nothing more powerful than being an eyewitness, right? Yep. So I think it's important to do that. And it's people when people were lied about in the media or lied about by the government, and then they saw us saying, no, that's bullshit, they were like, I don't know, that's good. Like, it's good that we had someone there that was actually, watching what was going on.
Yeah. And it was all a lot of bullshit. Like, I think I went down to one of the big ones. I think it was like the day after all the CFMEU stuff went down, and then they ended up on the Westgate and everything. Yeah, it was massive. But like, again, it was one of those situations where like it was actually nothing like it was presented on the news. Like, every single person in the protest was like,
they were saying they're all Nazis.
Yeah, like everyone, they were all literally working class men that just wanted to like look after their families. Like, crazy.
Yeah, we were there the day before when they had the protest at the offices.
Yep.
And I just heard about something was happening in the morning. My staff told me. And so we said, oh, well, we better go check it out. So we went down there and we're just watching what was happening. And, we talked to a few people and said, why are you here?
Yep.
And, they were there because, like, they didn't want the mandatory vaccinations, and they didn't want the sheds closed.
Yep.
They considered that something that they'd fought. You know, the union guys had fought a long time for, to have the lunch sheds.
Yep.
And they were pissed off about it. So they wanted the sheds opened, and they didn't want mandatory vaccines, and they wanted the union to support them. They wanted to march down to Parliament and like tell the government to get stuffed.
Yep.
But that's not what happened.
Yep.
And they went nuts. And then everyone started calling them Nazis and all, which was absolutely ridiculous. Like if you look at the crowd out the front, there was heaps of like, you know, Islanders,
all
Indian guys, like all sorts of people.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, if they were, I don't know, if they were Nazis, they were pretty well disguised.
Yeah. They were literally the dudes that have built your roads and probably houses that you're living in. Like they were far from Nazis. Like but again, that's just what they paint it as. They paint this whole big picture, and then you actually go there and you're like, hold on, there's a whole bunch of civilians, but then the coppers are over here in riot gear shooting, like they're antagonizing the crowd. Like it's the opposite to what's being told on TV. Like, don't get me wrong, the crowd's very alive and loud and maybe intimidating to a point.
But there's a
That
reason
one-
for it, and
Correct.
they're all aware of it.
Yeah.
That one down at the office though, that was full on. Like,
Oh,
that
it would have
was-
been.
Yeah, that they were a different crowd to what had been protesting about the COVID restrictions.
Yes.
The guys that were protesting about the COVID restrictions, sometimes it got a bit lively, but it was generally like, you know, they were pretty peaceful and mostly well behaved.
Yeah.
But these guys down at the office, they were mad and they wanted to. They wanted to kick some ass, and they were throwing bottles and smashing windows, and they were like going wild.
Yeah.
And the cops were just sitting off to the side. The cops were just like, nah.
Don't want part.
Yeah. Well, it was pretty full on. Like we ended up leaving like when things started really kicking off, and we were just like, all right, well, we better go now because I think it's starting to get pretty dangerous. So,
Isn't that crazy? Like, choose your battle. You know, where the cops like, we're going to step in and enforce here because we've got it over this group.
Yeah.
But these dudes are going nuts and they're smashing shit, and they're probably got some go behind them. Let's step back.
Well, it's sort of weird because like technically that was the day before. Like, so it's almost like the day before, first day it all went down, and they were like, okay. And then the next day was like, righto, we're bringing in the big guns, and we're just
they didn't have the port guys. So you know the guys in black, the public order response team.
Yep.
So they didn't have them early on. They came later.
Yep.
So I think the guys, the cops that were there early on, they were just like normal cops, and they weren't going to go in and fight something like that. They wanted the guys with all the stormtrooper gear and
pretty
stuff.
much.
So
They
came later on.
Which came the next sort of day, but it's an interesting. That whole experience for me was quite like, so I sort of did the same thing. I was like, look, I'm just going to go down there. I got a camera. I'm just going to document and just see it for myself and see what's going on here. And like, the sort of side that you're seeing was very much like, it was a positive force that was made to look negative, you know, like, but at the same time, it was also like super weird. Like, I don't even think I've even talked about this anyway, but like, I got decked by some random dude. So one of the...
For what?
Oh, well, I had cameras on me. So I don't know if I just looked like a camera guy, because at that time too, it was very much like, fuck the media.
Yeah, right.
And I think one of the... what's that bald dude from Channel 7? He got the can thrown at his head.
Dowsley, yeah.
He was there, and I think he was... I can't even quite remember, but I think he might have been like standing on something and maybe even doing a bit of a talk.
Oh, like near you.
Near me. And I was just sort of like filming around that. So it could have looked like I was one of his cameramen, right? Random dude, bellied up, ready to go, comes in and just decks me, dude, round the neck, like to the point where he grabbed me. And you know when you get like you're at a party and your mate grabs you and you're like, what's going on here? I feel like for the first 2 seconds,
like, who's this?
I was like, who's this? And then I'm like, crunch. I'm on the ground. Like, what just happened? This dude sort of got up. Another dude grabbed him, and it was got a bit like restlessy. And then he disappeared. And it was weird, man, because he wasn't one of them. Like, he was and I don't want to jump straight to it, but he even seemed like a plant. Like he was there to do one job, and that was to like attack the media. And I was in the right spot at the right time. It was weird.
Wrong.
Yeah, right.
Right. Maybe right. I don't know. Yeah, it was really strange because it was.
That's pretty full on.
Yeah, it was.
Did you get hurt?
Nah, I've hit the ground a few times in my life. So I got pretty good like air awareness, so I know how to like hit the ground pretty
Like a
well.
cat.
But no, it was more just like a what the fuck just happened because it was a bail. Like he decked me, and I think he might have even like ripped one of the other camera dudes a little bit, but like really got me. And then civilians were sort of like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" Blah blah blah. And he sort of like towed off with them a little bit and like got off them, and then just like and was just gone.
And
like,
had a balaclava on.
full bellied up, dude, and full gloves, belly, hoodie. Like he was sent there to do
something.
business. Like.
It's a bit rough. Like normally if you cop a smack in the mouth, you at least know the reason for it, right?
Yeah. I was like, what? I'm not even, I'm on the good side. I thought I was the good side of media. Like, I'm like, but I mean, at the same time, it's sort of a good story. So
Fucking camera's got
shit
you.
happens. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he even broke. No, he didn't break because I had a 360 camera on the back, so it was sort of like always recording everything.
Yeah.
But I think when I hit the deck, it like cracked the camera a little bit, and I had to send me footage off and get it like. I haven't even released that footage, to be completely honest. It sort of happened because it was all sort of.
I remember when it happened. You told us about it.
It's one of those times. It was like, even if you said you were at one of those protests, people were like, "You're a dog," and you're like, "What?" I'm like, I'm literally just like, I'm documenting it, but they're like, "Oh, you went there, you're a fucking boo." So I think I just sort of sat on it for a little bit, and then. Almost probably forgot until like this convo. I was like, oh shit, that happened. But
Might have some good footage you could use.
yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm like, go viral. I'm gonna go back and find that today and post it up. But how long have we been talking for? Oh, that's pretty good. I do have another dot point here, and I think that's probably one of the biggest ones because we are here and we're talking about it. It is freedom of speech, and they're trying to crack down on that. And I'm a big believer of freedom of speech. Don't you tell me what the fuck I can and can't say. So how
You need it for this show.
Well, that's I like to consider myself a really honest dude. So like, I don't want to beat around the bush and not say things to hurt anyone's feelings. If your feelings are hurt, go deal with it yourself. That's not my problem. But how do you think that's all of that's coming in, and what's your sort of like take on it? Obviously, you represent freedom of speech, but what's it looking like? And at what level? What is it? Just what they say goes? How do you even control that?
Yeah.
Or do they think they can control it?
They do. They think they can control the tobacco
anything.
market as well, though.
Yeah.
And
Look how
everything
that's
else.
going.
Yeah. Again, this is like there's real problems, right, in society with there's real problems with misinformation. There's real problems with certain groups in society being attacked because of their sexuality or their religion or whatever it is, or their skin color or whatever it is. So they're real problems. And so what the government does always is they say, well, we're going to come up with new rules for these problems, new laws. And so at a federal level, they've got this misinformation bill, which is actually looking pretty shaky now, but that's targeted at social media companies to try and get misinformation taken down because they say misinformation is a problem, we'll create laws to get rid of it. But of course, that creates another problem, which is who decides what is and isn't misinformation, which is a big problem.
Yes.
At a state level, we've got an even bigger concern to my mind. They're actually bringing it into Parliament next week. They're calling it the anti-vilification laws, and it's been in the pipeline for years. This is about addressing harms to minority groups, people, religious groups or whatever, and we've seen a lot of it in the city, like Jewish people getting attacked, people who are gay or whatever getting attacked, and these are real problems. They're totally real problems. But the solution that they've got for this is to say, well, we're gonna make it a crime if you ridicule or cause incite ridicule or incite serious contempt based on a set of what they call protected characteristics. So this is, sex, race, sexuality, etc., like a whole, disability status, a whole bunch of characteristics.
Yep.
Now, in theory, that sounds good, but the problem is, what does severe ridicule actually mean, and is sometimes that actually a good thing? And effectively, you can creating all of these controls on the way that people can speak.
And comedy? Does comedy fall into that? Like,
Well,
are you
could.
not
It
allowed to
could.
make a joke
could.
because it...
It could. So we haven't seen the details of the exact laws yet, but yeah, it could. Like if you were making a joke that was, racist or something, it could be that someone took offence to that, and you could end up in trouble for saying that.
Yep.
Could be, it's pretty full on stuff. So we'll get to see like the fine details of that next week. They're going to bring it into Parliament. It's not going to be debated or voted on until next year.
Yep.
But suffice to say, we're not happy about what the government's trying to do here. We think it's a big mistake. I actually think it's going to backfire because what will happen is you'll get people that will test the limits of these laws, and you'll end up in a situation where people who say bad things will become martyrs, right? Because and we've already seen this, like we've seen with the government's already tried to legislate. We had this Nazi problem with actual Nazis, not the ones, not the ones that they pretend are Nazis, actual Nazis. Yeah. There's a small number of them in Victoria, and so they made these laws. It's illegal to do the Nazi salute or have the Nazi symbol.
Yep.
And of course, first thing they do, like within hours of these laws coming into effect, they tested it and they got arrested, and they're happy with it because they become a martyr. It's a platform to promote their ideas.
Yes.
The first guy's got sentenced to a month jail. He doesn't care. He's happy to go and do it for his cause. You know what I mean? And this is a sort of, I've said it's backfired spectacularly. Instead of suppressing these groups, it's given them a platform to do more bad stuff.
Yep.
And I think it's the same with these other laws. It's just had the inverse effect of what they were hoping to do. And I think these laws that they're bringing in, I think it'll be the same thing. It'll spectacularly backfire. I think that you can't legislate away hate, right? You got to, if you want, social cohesion is what they talk about. If you want people to get along, you have to say, well, what are the boundaries for people to interact with? And we say it's the harm principle.
Yep.
But they're saying, well, you shouldn't say nasty things and whatever. And, I agree. You shouldn't say nasty things, but legislating this way and criminalising speech, I don't think it'll have the effect that they're intending. I think it'll fail.
Well, and as you said all that, it makes a lot, I would almost fall into that category. Let's just say at the start of next year, some free speech laws come in and they were like, you can't say this. I'm going to say it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You watch me say it, you know, and again, if the repercussions again, and I'll ride that train because I know that train is probably good for publicity too, that I'm like...
Well, yeah, it's bad incentives, right? Because people are going to people are going to do the calculations. They're going to say, well, what would happen if I breach these laws? And they say, well, I'll go to court and stuff, but I'll probably be really famous.
Everyone
will get something out of it.
Everyone will respect me more, and I'll have that sort of... Because I am saying things that everyone else is scared to say. Yeah, that's... Do you think in the long run it'll go through, or do you think it'll just be a pushback most of the time?
I don't know. At a state level, not many people know about it yet. So we're trying to raise awareness of what the government's actually doing.
Yep.
But at the federal level with these misinformation laws... There's pushback on that has been absolutely spectacular. It's looking like now enough senators have flipped their position that the law potentially won't pass.
Yeah, right.
And the government might be in trouble and have to pull it. So
that's cool.
That would be good if that actually happened.
Yep.
At a state level, we don't know yet. I still don't even know if the opposition are going to oppose it or not.
Yep.
We'll have to wait and see. But look, I think some people are getting a bit shaky on it. Even the Greens that have been really pushing for this for a long time now, I think they're starting to worry about it as well, because they're thinking, well, are actually our supporters going to be attacked by this, and like I think they will actually. Like the government clearly wants to use it against these, Palestine protesters and stuff, and like a lot of them are Green supporters.
Yep.
And you're thinking they're probably going to be the first ones that get hit with this.
True.
Not the the Nazis
Yep.
or whoever else they were thinking of. It's like because the premier herself started talking about, oh well, we need these laws to deal with like these people that are shutting down the kids who want to see the windows. And this is the thing, like they always have some legitimate problem in society, and they are legitimate problems, like people getting attacked or misinformation or kids can't go see the windows. They're all legitimate problems.
Yep.
But the government reaction causes more problems, and that's what libertarians are trying to say is like just like hold your horses a bit. Like maybe there's other ways of doing this, or maybe we can deal with this another way. Legislating it might have really negative effects. It might not have the effect that you think it will.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
Do you think when the government jumps to things like that, they even think about the effects, the after effect, the ripple effect?
They think about it. But like they're sort of, in a lot of ways, they're sort of like high on their own supply sort of thing.
So
right?
they're arrogant.
They
towards-
think that they're all powerful and that they'll be able to manage it. And if there's if there's negative consequences, they'll deal with it down the track or whatever. Like
We've got the resources to do or fix the problem that we maybe create.
I think the consequences from the Nazi salute thing have sort of shaken them a bit, because that's played out pretty much exactly how the libertarians said it would play out.
Right.
You'd end up with martyrs. You'd end up giving them a platform.
Yep.
It would backfire spectacularly, and that's exactly what's happened.
Yep.
And so, I was like, well, we were right. We were right, and we're right about this other stuff that you want to do too.
Yep.
Maybe you should listen to us this time. And I think they're sort of listening, and they're still going ahead with it, but they're sort of thinking, oh, geez, I hope they're not right. But
Yeah.
well, we'll wait and see. But
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of potential big problems with this.
But do you think they're that arrogant that no matter how right you are, they could potentially just go against it anyway?
Yeah, well, they do that all the time. So it's a lot of it. They get egged on by people as well. So they get egged on by the advisors. They get egged on by activist groups. They get egged on by the general public. Like usually, sometimes they're really good at scaring people with stuff in the media. Like the Christmas windows is a good one. Because they say, well, we need laws to deal with this because this is awful. We don't want these kids, not being able to go and see Santa in the windows or whatever.
Yep.
They can convince people. That's what they sort of rely on, being able to convince people that, we need these laws. We need it. If we don't have it, there's going to be all these bad things happen.
Yes.
Yep.
Which I just don't think is true.
Yeah.
I don't think either. I think they know that it's not true.
Well, they like being able to control stuff. They think,
it's that control thing. It's like being
Regardless of what they know.
See, that's like the authoritarian versus the libertarian mindset. The libertarian mindset is, we don't want to, you can't control things at a top-down level because there's all these unintended consequences. But the top-down authoritarian mindset is, if I just turn the levers and turn the knobs the right way and implement the right things and spend enough money, then everything will be perfect and we'll have this utopia. That's what a lot of people think, and it's not true.
Yep.
Where do you think that mind state comes from? Like, how do they believe? Is that just not coming from reality?
Oh no, a lot of people throughout all history thought like that. That's basically the essence of a lot of political ideologies. Like socialism is like that, where you have like total control centralized by the state, and if only we can manage everything perfectly, we'll have this utopia. It never works out like that.
Yes, no.
But a lot of political ideologies rest on the idea of centralized control of everything, pretty much. And a lot of these people in politics believe in that. They believe that control should be centralized. They believe that if they get the levers just right, that
it'll all work.
Yeah, everything will be great. But libertarians have the opposite view. We think that when you centralize control and power like that, you only have to look at history to see what happens. When that happens, we think it's dangerous. So
100%. Yeah.
I think, and I'm just sort of popped in too, that I was just sort of like, I think that could be something. Obviously, in the States, Trump's come back in. Do you think what's going on there now will sort of start to reflect here? Which I think, in a nutshell, what I see is going on is the transparency of, they're incompetent. And, we've voted these and we've proved that. Let's give this sort of big dog a go again, who's obviously keen and wanting to have a crack. Yeah, do you think that sort of stuff will mirror over here a little bit at all? And people like you will have that sort of underdog opportunity to take down these big guys?
It'll definitely have an effect. I mean,
Yes.
America's a very different place to here. But they've got really big problems in the US, and the biggest problem is the size of their government. They're in debt, like almost mind-blowing amounts of debt.
Yep.
The size of the US bureaucracy is beyond comprehension. And they've sort of come in and Trump said, well, I'm going to form this team and we're going to get rid of, all this stuff. And they brought in Elon Musk and he's basically saying he's going to do what he did at Twitter and sack 80% of people. And, that's good. Like, they need to downsize government and we need to do it here as well. We're not in as much trouble as the US is in terms of, the size of our debt, but we're still in a fair bit of trouble. Look, I think the biggest thing will be the ideas that, like, the ability to argue things, like, the idea of massive downgrading in the size of government, that's a good idea. And, like, people need to talk about that more in Australia. And I think at the moment it's only libertarians talking about it. But maybe more people will start talking about that. And that's sort of what they're talking about in the United States at the moment, through necessity, really, because you can't just keep growing forever. Victorian government as well, they've been growing and growing and growing for a long time. And I've been, egging them on, like, maybe we should start cutting back on the size of government. And they're sort of forced into it through financial reality now in Victoria. We just can't. There's not many more ways they can raise taxes. They can't raise much more debt. So the only other thing to do is cut down the size of the government, which they sort of have to do. But I think it will have an effect here. As to, what sort of effect, it's hard to know. But I think the biggest one will be talking about ideas about cutting down the size of the state. But it's nothing short of, like, revolutionary what they're talking about in the US. How it actually pans out is another story, right? Different. Like, I know people had big hopes for Trump last time and didn't really turn out that way. And maybe it's different this time. Well, I don't know. We'll wait and see. A lot of people are paying close attention.
Always seems to be a ripple effect from the States to Australia, no matter what.
Well, that's sort of what we sort of follow suit a little bit. So that's why I was like, it might become a bit more trendy to, have the underdog sort of come up and do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of weird what they're doing as well. Like, they've sort of assembled this cast of billionaires. Right? They're not, like, I wouldn't call them underdogs. Like, these are all, like, the most successful people in the world have gotten together and decided that they're going to do all this stuff. Vivek and Musk and all these other guys. They're all, like, really, really successful people. Like, literally the richest dude in the world is helping them. Now, is that a good thing or not? I don't know. We'll wait and see. I like some of what Musk is saying. He's clearly a very visionary and accomplished man. I'm a fan of his. I've been a fan of what he's doing with SpaceX for years. I think it's amazing. But, how's that related to Australia? Like, it's quite different here, right?
Yes,
like, we don't have that sort of culture. We have a very different political system. Like, the way the political system works here is nothing like the United States. But, a lot of those ideas might come across. We'll wait and see.
Across.
Interesting.
Is that your goal? Is to get to the top? Do you just want to just keep putting your input in? Like, do you have I want to be premier or?
Like
premier, and then what is that?
Well, it's prime minister at the federal level.
Federal level. Is that a goal?
Look, I mean, over the long term, we'd like to. Over the medium term, our goal is to get more people elected. So there's going to be a federal election next year. We want to get a senator from Victoria elected to federal parliament. His name's Jordan Ditloff. I've been working with him to, we're trying to raise his profile and get him elected. And then after that, I think the next thing is we want to get more people elected at a state parliament. We're not saying we're going to form government, but, like, I think it's realistic that we could get a number of senators at least elected in the a number of upper house members elected in Victorian Parliament. That could put us in a position where, we're potentially in the balance of power, which means that we could stop stupid laws going through, which means you're not in government, but you can actually stop stupid
You got
crap.
a little bit more
Input.
Yeah, you can stop stupid crap. Like, we've had a good effect just with one member of parliament. There's no reason, if we got 2, 3, 4 people in, we could have a huge effect, I think. And that's what we're thinking medium term.
Yep. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yep. He's gone on the toilet. This guy's just dipped on us. It's pretty much going to almost end it up anyway, but we could probably keep talking a bit of shit to keep it going. And on another note too, which is actually quite funny, I'll touch base, and I found this out Friday before this all happened. Azza?
Yeah.
Bok.
Yeah.
He was on the podcast.
Really? I didn't know that.
3 weeks ago, and I literally shot a music video.
I used to be in a band with him.
Yeah.
I was a drummer with Azza.
Which,
yeah.
Again, I think touching base.
He was my
on that.
flatmate.
Yeah, he said you live with him for like 4 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's sort of another thing.
I didn't know you knew Azza.
Yeah.
Okay. How funny is that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
When
he's still doing the death metal like we used to when I yeah.
So you obviously you play instruments and all that stuff.
Drums.
Yeah. It was just sort of one of those things that sort of I didn't even click on, and then we sort of had a bit of a yarn yesterday, and I was like, bloody God, it's all going on. He's like, I fucking lived with him for 4 years or some shit. Like,
yeah.
He used to, he like you said, you put him onto like his now favourite band.
What's his favourite band now?
He said it the other day.
Morbid Angel.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, they're my favourite band. If it wasn't for Dave, I wouldn't have known about
Yeah, they're
them.
great.
It's like,
Yeah.
And I think that's probably something too, just to touch on to show your character too. I think, like most people look at people in your positions as like proper sort of, but like, you're into your metal, you play drums, you're a pretty normal dude. Yeah. You'd consider yourself a pretty normal dude.
Well, I don't know, like if playing metal and drums is normal, but
it's probably not. It's a little bit, what's it called? Alternative, but it's better than being sort of,
we used to live in Cranny and we played in a band. I think we won second prize in Cranbourne Battle of the Bands.
No way. That's crazy.
Yeah, we won second. I think we got a $50 music shop voucher or something. But
True.
Yeah, it was good fun. We played at a few parties and some event and stuff. But yeah, it was pretty good times. Yeah.
Is that with Azza?
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hold anymore. I did it again, but yeah.
So how do you guys know him?
So I know Azza through obviously the band more. I worked with Dan, who was the lead singer of Frankenbach for a while there.
Yep.
I screen printed with him.
Right.
And there was sort of that little bit of I was screen printing for him. They did like a little bit of like a tour thing, and Dan was like, "Do you want to come film us? Shoot this gig?" And then that's sort of how I met all the boys. And me and Azza was just one of those things where I think we were just sort of pretty similar. We just like really got along well.
Yeah, he's a cool guy.
And
bikes.
Yeah, bikes, all that sort of stuff. And I think this was 7-8 years ago now.
Yeah.
And like literally I filmed their music video on Saturday. We went out to his joint. We shot, I don't know, pretty sure he broke his thumb.
Oh, really?
Azza, brother, I was just going to put big, what's it called? Get well soon to Azza out there. Yes, bro, last shot too. Nah, not, you know what's even worse? I feel a little bit
So you broke me and now you've broken Azza.
just push motherfuckers here. So, last shot, we'd pretty much got everything. And like risky shit, man. We had dudes on the roof hanging on with chains. I was on the bonnet filming shit. There was moments where it could have gone wrong, but we just pushed through. Last shot, we had another dude there taking photos. He was just getting like a long shot car hooking through. It was a bit Mad Maxy. A few bikes, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, last shot, let's get it. We did 2 takes. Azza took off first, and then he was too far in front, and then he was too far behind. And I'm like, fucking stay here with me, bruv. All right, let's do it. Bob. Car takes off. I'm riding next to him. So it's pretty much car in front, 2 bikes on each side, just a bit of an erratic sort of shot. Yeah, cool beans. Go to pin it, and I just look to my side.
Azza's on a bike.
Yeah, he's on the XR4 Ungie, and I'm on his like RMZ 4.
DRZ 400.
TRZ 400, right? No helmets. Pretty risky now that I sort of stop and think about it. But, you know, when you're getting the shots, you're getting the shots. I just look over and next thing you know, he's hands off and he's like catching it and I'm like, oh, he's fucking going down. I've like locked up to be like, righto. Next thing you know, he's pull up. Oh, you're good, bruv. And he's looking at me with fucking shock eyes. Like, yeah, I think so. And I'm like, oh, okay. Breathe. You're good. Blah, blah, blah. Get
Check
in
the
car.
body.
Because I'm fucking hands a bit fucking sore. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, can you move everything? He's like, yeah, it should be right. Okay, blah, blah. He messaged me this morning. Yeah, it's pretty sure it's broken. I'm like, fuck.
Yo,
And it was me.
Strumming.
Well, yeah.
Oh, no.
His right hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
As a...
yeah, he's got a gig in like a week or something too. I'm like, oh my god, this is now we're gonna hire a stuntman.
Just connect the plectrum to the
Yeah,
plastic.
I reckon he'll be right. And even like he even said, he goes, "This is not the first." Apparently, his first gig, he did it with 2 broken hands.
Yeah.
Like back in the day. Yeah, he broke both his wrists doing something and still rocked up to the gig. Just, I've got this. I'm not fucking missing me. Classic Azza, but.
Yeah.
Crazy little full circle story there.
Small world.
It is. And like, yeah, when I first heard it, I was like, and it was also one of those things too, like I sort of said, like, you're clearly not a regular guest. I'm not really hanging out with politicians very often or anyone on that level. So there was a little bit of intimidation after you said yes. I was like, oh, fuck, what have
I
I
wasn't
got
expecting that.
What have I got
He said it to me. He goes, man, I wasn't expecting the response. I just threw it out there.
Just being confident, you know? I was like, fuck, what do I even say here? But once I sort of had that yarn with Ozra, I was like, fuck, man, that's good because you're just a normal dude and fuck, we're going to have
Apparently,
mad
he's got a
convos.
video of a gig we did like many, many years ago.
Really?
Yeah, right.
So, like, I'm wondering if he's holding it to try and blackmail me or something.
So what were you guitar?
Drums.
Yeah, right.
I used to have really long hair. So
True.
Yeah.
Do you still play?
Not much. My kids all play drums now, so
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm generating more drummers.
Nice. That's
That's
what you got to do.
good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, I don't know. I also feel like it's one of those things that just sort of, I think it's good. That's a good part that like sells your character that, you know, you just, because I think we picture these like politicians, if you will, and that especially people from the outside, it's all seems all like fancy and shiny and like you've never done anything fucking real in your life. But which I guess that's why you stand out because you have done real things and then your point of view shows. And
Is there people majority like that are in playing your game?
All over the place. There's a bunch that have never done anything else. But
Spoon fed as such, and
Yeah.
then you got others that have lived like you.
yeah, there's a mix. There's a mix of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, interesting.
probably not many metal drummers though.
No, I reckon you'd be quite the majority there for sure.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's actually funny too because like all this came about. I'm actually going to Parliament in Canberra tomorrow. Well, actually, I think we're going to leave tonight because we're driving because they do. Do you know that men's awareness thing where they lay all the boots out on the grass?
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
So my mate Gaz
For,
sort of
like
do a bit
men's
of-
mental health.
Yeah, but like the whole thing with that is like there's a whole media black ban on it. Like media do not show that event. They do not, and like it's this weird little government-y weird sort of thing where they're
there's a lot of
Is there-
talk about. Is it to do with like self-harm and stuff? Because there's a lot of media don't report on stuff like that because they're worried about it. Yeah.
because it's almost like they're like encouraging it.
Yeah,
Well, it's all- it's all-
It's sort of like there's a big sort of debate about whether it's a good idea to report on it or not.
Even suicide
Yeah,
because that's self-harm.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like so a lot of the time they don't report on stuff like that because of that, I think. But I don't know, like
I think it needs to be known.
Yeah.
Like anything.
yeah,
You know,
and
and
that's
it's a
not the
problem.
government. That's not the government sort of telling them what to do. That's sort of the media.
More of a
sort
media thing of
figuring
like
out,
it's not hot enough really.
no, well, it might be that it's
Too much.
not an interesting story, or it might be that they're just not sure of the angle or how to report it. So I don't know, but we'll wait and see. Like,
Interesting.
yeah,
That's why I say I think there's like a lot of push for like actual social media people to get down there and broadcast it rather than
Yeah, okay.
You know,
so you're
all that
going to
sort of
take footage of it and stuff.
Yeah, I'm just going to float around. It's like because me and mate Gaz, I don't know if you know Gaz, right? He does a bit of he's like an ex-con, if you will, that's sort of back on that like positive tip. So he does a lot of that shit for like mental health and all that sort of stuff. So he's just going down there for that, and he sort of hit me up and said, "Do you want to get amongst it?" And I was like, I think I have to because there's this weird universal thing where I have a politician on my podcast on a Monday and then I've been offered to go to Parliament House on a Tuesday. Something about that all lines up, so I'm going. Let's go.
Right.
So yeah, I was like, because like being a dude that's never really had anything to do with any of that shit, when it all sort of comes in at once, it's, to me, it's like,
You have to jump on.
yeah, there's something behind this. So anyway, that'll be interesting. But other than that, I think that's probably, I don't want to like ring a dead cat out too much. I think that was a pretty good yarn. We're on a good time. What are we at? About an hour and a half? That's perfect.
Lovely.
Absolutely lovely. Unless you've got
Yeah,
anything
is
to
there
like
anything
ask us, or anything, or
Oh,
Not to put you on the
Yeah,
spot
I
at
know.
all.
put me on the spot.
No, not even about us. Just,
yeah, just
I got to
in
know
general.
more about Azza now. And
True.
because I didn't, I tell you, yeah, he contacted me during the pandemic, and
Yeah.
we met in the city. He rode his bike into the city,
Yep.
and yeah, it was wild because I hadn't seen him for like 30 years or something,
Yeah.
like a long
Shit.
time.
That's
But
crazy. Like, how old do you think you were when you were living together?
I was 18.
True.
Yeah, he would have been. Oh no, I would have been 18. He would have been about the same age.
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
maybe a year younger or something.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, wow. Full on, huh? That's crazy. Still, yeah.
yeah. We were teenagers basically. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then yeah, that was wild. And then I ended up moving out because I went to where did I go next? Just trying to think. Jesus, a long time ago.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say I
living
ended
in
up
the-
moving out because shit got too wild.
No,
I had to bail.
no. I moved to the city. And then after that, I moved to Ballarat.
Yep.
Yep.
But,
Interesting.
yeah, I lost contact with him after I moved out. And
Yeah, as that happens sort of
It
in
does,
those
it
times.
does, it
Yeah.
does.
And especially back in those days too, you weren't just friends on Facebook or had them on Instagram, you know.
No,
It
well,
was-
there was no Facebook or
Yeah,
Instagram,
yeah.
and we didn't even have mobile phones. So
Yeah.
Yep.
it's easy to lose contact. It's funny, you sort of make contact. I went through a phase where I was trying to contact all those people that I lost contact
Yeah,
with.
yeah,
'cause
yeah.
Like you say, it was so easy
Yep.
back in the 90s to lose contact with people.
Yep.
Yep.
And yeah, it's been interesting, like meeting up with him again. It was great meeting up with Azza in the
Yeah.
city. Like he came into Parliament, we had a chat, and
Yep.
it was
I think he even said that. He said that he sort of caught up with you and shit, but that's
yeah.
Small world, huh?
Yes.
All right, well, let's call it a show. That's pretty good.
It was awesome to have you on.
It
Yeah,
was.
thanks
It
for having
really
me.
was. Really
As,
appreciate it. Thank you
yeah.
very much. It's definitely a different vibe than we're used to, but hopefully it's also opens more doors and yeah, we can sort of get into a little bit of this stuff and
Hopefully at one point we can have you back and
Yeah. We
Yeah.
have to get Azza on too.
we got to
at a
get
different
do
point.
some catch ups. It'd be good as get a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. All right, too good. Thank you very much once again. Cheers.
you.
Thanks for coming. Make sure you do all the things like subscribing and that and check out the rest of them and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.
Cheers.
My die!